Namaskar. Hello viewers. Welcome to another episode of Cultural Journey with Manoshi. Today, I'll be taking you on an incredible journey with an incredible personality. The man with sign. That's what he is popularly known as, Mr. Warren Sanders. A climate change activist, a passionate lover of Indian classical music, a singer, a composer, and a teacher. Let us talk to him and go on his cultural journey today. Namaskar. Welcome to our studios, Warren.
Thank you so much, Manoshi. It's a great pleasure to be here.
My first question to you is, how did this cultural journey of yours start?
You will no doubt be unsurprised to learn that this is not the first time that someone has asked me this question.
I'm sure.
The long story, the long version of the story is 44 years long to tell, so I won't try and inflict that on you. But the short version, when I was about 15 or 16, through a series of unpredictable and unprecedented and unanticipated events, I came into possession of an LP record of light orchestral music by Ravi Shankar that included some vocal interludes. And one of them was a little improvisation by Lakshmi Shankar. And when that came on, I was immediately mesmerized. I knew there was something that was so attractive and so fascinating about it. And then my interest was piqued. And then through another concatenation of circumstances, within a few weeks, I came into possession of 3 LP records. Our older viewers will remember LP records, those big black plastic objects. One representing the music of the Dagar brothers, the great Drupad singers, one of Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, and one of Prabha Atre, the great Khayal singer. And so when I listened to those recordings, and especially in the first moment to the singing of Prabha Atre, it sounded to my ears as though she was enjoying herself.
Yes.
At a very high level. She really sounded like she was having a great time. And I thought, I want to have a taste of that enjoyment. That sounds like it's tremendous fun to do.
Right. So, did you meet somebody who started teaching you, or you just listened to those songs and
I was in
copying?
Boston, and I was working at the time with a man named Robert Ruttman. He's still alive. He's in Germany now. He had an ensemble of sheet metal instruments. These were pieces of sculpture. And so he created this very unusual abstract sound sculpture music, a lot of big droning noises and strange sounds. And I was part of his group when we played in various avant-garde art forums and so on. And one evening, he had an Indian woman singing an alap in a raga while he played a drone on one of these instruments. And so this was the first time that I'd seen this in person.
Like having live.
Yeah, and so I went up to her afterwards and I said, I want to study music with you. Yeah. I was very long hair and a beard and dressed in my tattered blue jeans and my hippie garb. And this would have been 1976.
Right.
So she looked, I think, quite properly a little askance, But she said, "You want to study with me?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And so that was Kalpana Mazumdar, who is still living in the Boston area, and with whom I studied for 8 years.
Wow.
So I used to go and take lessons from her every week, and she worked very patiently and thoughtfully with me in ironing out the initial kinks in my voice and getting me introduced to the world of raga.
Right. So were you doing jazz and African music and all those things before, or Indian classical music?
Well, I had been fascinated by jazz music and fascinated really in general by just about everything that had to do with all the disciplines of organized sound. But my formal study of Western music began in the same week of the same year as my formal study of Indian classical music.
That is amazing. Okay.
So the two music systems, although I had earlier exposure to these disciplines of Western music, my formal study, the actual structural concepts, the rigorous types of practice and study and analysis that are required, those are synchronous.
Right. So do you think they have helped each other when you are singing Indian classical and doing jazz?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think in the long run, yes, they helped. In the short run, it meant that my attention was divided.
Right.
And I couldn't be 100% certain of what I was needing to practice at any given time.
Right.
So it took a while for me to develop a meaningful personal discipline of practice and of understanding and integrating all of those threads.
Right. So who were your other gurus? Are you still
in Indian music?
In Indian music.
In Indian music.
Sorry, yes.
Well, I had learned initially from Kalpana Mazumdar for 8 years. Then in 1985 I was awarded a grant from the Council for International Exchange of Scholars. And this was nominally to go to Pune in Maharashtra and to study with Bhimsen Joshi.
Okay.
So I went to Pune and I established an apartment there and began going to Bhimsenji's home. But as a great performer, he was not really in a position to give me talim. He had many people who called themselves his disciples, and mostly they played tanpura for him in concerts.
Right.
He did not spend a lot of time giving instruction. And the particular needs that I experienced as a non-Indian, as a Westerner, coming to India and trying to assimilate the music and integrate it into my own ways of thinking, were not things that he was really capable of addressing. So it wasn't until the middle of 1986 that I met Pandit Sriram Devastali, who was my principal guru and the person who gave me the most detailed instruction.
So did you live in India for how long? And
I lived in India for about 6 years.
And so was it a Guru Shishya Parampara, that traditional
way? My guru, we never did the Gandha Bandhan ceremony or any of that, but in the sense that he devoted his full attention to me, and then my fiancée and now wife began studying with him also, and we used to take lessons with him. Lessons were 4 hours a day, every day. And so in that sense, his relationship with me was that of a guru to a disciple. And I went, in the initial months, he said, "Call me Mr. Devastali." And then it naturally shifted into my calling him Guruji, because it was clear that was what he was. He was himself a disciple of the late Gajanan Rao Joshi, the great Khayal singer of Gwalior Parampara. And so then his particular methodology of teaching and his capacity for analysis was something that made it possible for me to learn very, very fast.
So as we are talking, do you in particular follow a gharana or a traditional school of music?
Well, the basic outlines of my gayaki are those of the Gwalior tradition. But my guru's lineage included, because his guru, Gajanan Rao Joshi, had also learnt in the Jaipur and Agra styles. So sometimes Guruji would give me compositions, this is a Jaipur cheese, It is to be elaborated in the Jaipur way.
Right.
This raga is the khasiyat of Agra Gharana. So then, if you are going to sing it, you should treat it in the Agra way. And then Kalpana ji, her initial training to me, she was a singer of Kirana Gharana.
Right.
So then all of those influences are there. And then my guru had also worked with Ustad Muhammad Hussain Khan, who was a Sarangia, who had become a singer. And he was an exponent of Bendi Bazar Gharana.
Right.
So then all of those threads came, and they were offered to me. It was more than I had anticipated.
Right.
I didn't go to India thinking I was going to become this multi-gharana synthesist, but then it wound up happening that way.
Yeah. Now that you're saying, I can hear you saying a lot of Hindi words quite correctly, very correctly, I would say. So, how did you learn that? Was that, again, gurus were very particular about that, or you yourself?
Devastali Bua was by profession a language teacher. And so one of the things that he said to me early on was that if I forget exactly, he said something like, if Bhimsenji sings a bandish and he makes a mistake in the pronunciation, his mistake will be an Indian mistake. So no one will have anything to say about it.
That's right.
But if you make a mistake, your mistake will be an American mistake. And then it will stand out like a sore thumb. So you must be especially meticulous in addressing these things so that no one has the chance to say that I have taught you wrongly. So he would drill me on these things.
Right.
You know, Americans can't distinguish between and ah. We are notorious for that. And so he would drill me on those things. And then the American inability to handle the th sound. That's a very big issue. I remember once, it was the easiest dad I ever got. I had been invited to sing at an Indian community event near my hometown, and while I was waiting, I was in conversation with one of the people, and then he was talking about American problems with pronunciation, and so he said, most Americans cannot say th, and I said th, and then he grabbed me by the arm and dragged me off to a whole bunch of his cronies all talking and began telling them, you know, here's an American who can say th. So then they looked at me and I went th, and they all went, ah, wah, wah, kya baat. If I'd known it was that easy, you know, I wouldn't have been practicing all these years.
That's hilarious. I have attended your concerts, Warren, also the workshops. I remember when you performed for Ragmala last year, 2 years ago, then you actually created a raga with the audience. And I would like to know a little bit about that part of yours. Like how do you do that, and what was it behind that you started doing this? And how many ragas really have you created like this? There must be
anytime
many.
I go and I give a lecture demonstration,
Right.
I create a raga.
Yes, I remember. It was called Agashri.
Yeah, in this case, basically what I do is I'll say, in order that you will understand what a raga really is, we're going to make one.
Right.
And part of that stems from countless exposure to bad lecture demonstrations. And I have seen a great many bad lecture demonstrations. The stigmata of a bad lecture demonstration is that the presenter is simply interested in showing off how much he or she knows, rather than in fostering actual understanding amongst the listeners. And so the work of a good lecture demonstration is to find ways to develop and foster that understanding.
Right.
So it's very common. Someone will come and say, I'm going to show you what raga is. Here's Raga Yemen. And they demonstrate Yemen. And then what happens if you ask the listeners, say this is in a college classroom, they will come out and their impression is that all Indian music is based on the scale of Yemen, because it was never made clear.
Right.
And so these kinds of misapprehensions emerge from poor or inadequate or poorly thought out presentations. And so my work then arose from a question: how can I convey the deeper structural principles of raga? That there are ways of going up and ways of coming down, and ways in which certain notes get more priority than others, and ways in which certain notes get a particular type of treatment, and ways in which certain notes are not allowed to be sung in certain contexts, and so on and so forth. And so then I developed this through giving a great many lecture demonstrations, basically, and trying it out.
Right.
And the result is there are certain things that are consistent across all of these creations.
Right.
So audiences tend to select the same swaras
Same
to work
kind of.
with. So there's only a few things that they wind up doing. No one ever selects sa re ga ma pa da ni za. They never select the Bilawal scale. I don't know why. They always select something with komal re, tivra ma, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, it's a little bit like the arcane knowledge of how to select repertoire so that you are prepared to answer any farmaish. In a concert, 99.99% of the time, the farmaishes, there are only about 20 ragas that are used as farmaishi items. So then if you know bandishes in those ragas, you can say, "I will be my pleasure to respond to your farmaishes," and then no one ever asked for any of the other ones.
Right.
So then I probably shouldn't say that. It's giving away a trade secret.
Okay, Warren, now that you're saying you, of course, do these workshops and all, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you must be teaching too.
I am by profession a teacher of
Yes.
Hindustani classical music.
So how do you do that? Do you have students in Hindustan, in India, or do you have
I have students all over the world. I teach online and I teach in person. I don't do group classes. It's just one-on-one pedagogy. And I have students of all ranges and skill levels. I also teach Western music, so I have people who study Western music with me. And I don't make any distinction between the students who are at musically very advanced levels and those who are at the beginning levels. That is to say, some people will say, "You're not talented enough to study with me," or whatever. If I have someone who cannot sing at all, then I take that as a project.
Right.
So in that sense, when I began my journey, I was not already a singer. I did not know how to use my voice. I did not know what it meant to sing in tune. So then these things were taught to me very carefully, and I learned them over the space of a long period of time. The labor of my teachers helped make me a competent musician. So by paying it forward, I have no reluctance at all to teach people who are beginners. It's quite fascinating. And sometimes the people who come and are rank beginners or who have various types of dysphonia, inability to reproduce pitches, their particular struggles are very revealing and really very beautiful in ways. There are so many stories of this. I remember this once, a fellow called me on the telephone, Indian guy, computer engineer, I think, and he said roughly, I want to sing, but I can't.
Right.
And this happens all the time. And usually what that means is that people's voices get a little tired or they're not quite sure how to sing in tune. He came for his first lesson, and it turned out that when he said, "I want to sing, but I can't," what he meant was that anytime he opened his mouth to sing, he had a coughing spasm.
Okay.
So his body would be racked by explosive coughs the minute he tried to form a note. And this is a puzzler. How do I break through this? And so I tried a variety of things and just got coughed at a lot. And so then I said, "Okay, I'll come to you." I said, "Do what I do." And I coughed. So he was able to do that. He coughed back. And I went back and forth. He began mirroring me. And then I went, "Ugh," and then I coughed. So I made a little unpitched groan and coughed. And then he was able to make the groan and a cough. And gradually over the space of the session, I extended the length of the groan and shortened the length of the cough. And by the end of the session, he was able to go, and that was a big success. And then we worked together for about a year. And then many years later, I was at a function, and a woman I did not know came up to me, and she said, "You are Warren Sanders. I need to tell you something." She said, "I am so-and-so's wife, and I want you to know that now he sings all the time. His whole life, he wakes up in the morning and the first thing he does is he begins to sing. He helps prepare our daughter for school, he's singing. He goes off in his car to work, he's singing. He comes home, he's singing. As he gets ready to go to bed, he sings all the time. She said, "Thank you so much. You have made my husband so happy." Yeah. And there's no greater reward that a teacher could ask for. It's not that necessarily my students have to go on and be on the concert platform. I have many wonderful, talented students who are making great strides. But for one person to have that experience, to find a voice where previously there had been none, this is right livelihood. This is, you know, this is the correct pathway. So I'm very fortunate in that.
Right. You name your concerts, I have seen some of the concerts, you name them Playing for the Planet.
Yes, that is a different arena entirely. It touches on my environmental activism, and that has less to do with my own personal performance, although I do sometimes perform for these events, but with the use of music as a unifying tool to raise awareness of climate change, which is the defining issue of the 21st century.
So you are known as Man of Sign.
Man with Sign.
Man with Sign, sorry. So please talk about it. What is it? What is this activism?
Well, when my daughter was born in 2005, my daughter's name is Sharada. My wife is Vijaya. We met in India. And at that time, contemplating her future, I began taking the reports of environmental destruction and the problems of climate change much more seriously, because having a child concentrates the mind wonderfully.
Right.
And I realized, because I come from a family of scientists, so I know enough about reading data to be able to look at a chart and go, I realized that we were in a lot of trouble. By we, I mean humanity in general. And that no one seemed to be taking it seriously beyond the climate scientists themselves. And no one was taking them seriously. Now, I'm just a musician. I'm just a guy. I don't have any great power. I don't have any great influence. But I realized that I had to do something. And if one thing that music has given me, one thing it has brought to me, is the ability to do something every day. Because that is the nature of riyaz.
Right.
You get up in the morning and you do your practice, whether you feel like it at the moment or not. That's the discipline of music. You do that so that 20 years from now, you have the technique and the tayari and the repertoire and all of those things. You do it whether you feel like it or not. So I determined that I was going to use that capacity in the service of the awareness of climate change. So I began a variety of projects, including for 4 years writing letters to the editor of newspapers, magazines, journals all over the world. So I wrote almost 1,500 letters to the editor, and I typically got 7 or 8 of them published every month in journals all over the world. Time magazine, the New York Times, Washington Post, the Toronto Star. I got published in the only newspaper in Greenland, the Nunatsiaq News. Not that they really needed me to tell them about climate change, but that was an opportunity. So I did that for 4 years. Every day I would hunt up some news about climate change and write a letter. I also began putting on benefit concerts for 350.org, the organization that is working to bring about global awareness of the threat of climate change and of the need for mitigation of our greenhouse gas emissions. 350, by the way, refers to the number of parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that is required to keep our civilization functioning. 350 is what is required. Right now, I'm looking at you, is our number is around 410 parts per million of carbon dioxide and increasing. That's not good. That's the equivalent of getting a grossly elevated blood pressure reading in your annual physical. You need to take steps to deal with it, not later, but now. So part of the work that emerged from that was to begin putting on these benefit concerts. And through my work in the Boston area, over the years, I have been a concert producer since 1979. I began as a very young man coordinating concerts in a community arts center. And so I knew the ins and outs of concert production. I can put on a show.
Right.
So I began calling people up. I knew all the people in all the musical areas because I'm connected with people who do African music and people who do jazz and people who do Western classical and Indian classical and so on. So I began making phone calls and inviting people, please will you come and be part of these concerts? So now over the years, I've raised many thousands of dollars for 350.org and then 350 Mass, the Massachusetts subsidiary of that. So that's been part of the work, is to do these concerts twice a year. We call them climate concerts. This December we'll put on the 20th such concert since 2009. But then I began to feel the need for something that would happen every day. And so then it occurred to me that I could bring all of the strands of my particular experience together with a very simple message. And that's why you can find it Man with Sign on Facebook.
Yes.
I get up every weekday morning. I missed today, it's a Friday, I'm in Toronto instead of in Boston.
Right.
I suppose I could have gone out on the QEW, but I don't know what the exigencies of that are. I get up and I have a big wooden sign and a couple of other signs that are secondary signs. The big wooden one says, "Climate change is real," and I have some other signs that I take out. And I go and I stand at a local intersection that's very heavily trafficked.
Is the same intersection every day? Or
yeah, same intersection every day. It's around the corner from my house, and it's a steady stream of cars during the morning rush hour. So 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. every morning, I'm out there holding my signs, and I sing.
And you sing.
I do my riyaz.
So how long do you stand
It's
there
an
for?
hour.
It's an hour.
I do an hour-long practice, and I write about it every day. So then
Yes.
people pass by and they sometimes say thank you, and sometimes they say you're an idiot or get a job.
And now that they see you every single day, do you still get those kind of responses where
Oh,
which
of course.
are negative?
Of course, yeah. Well, there are new people every day too. I have people who are old friends now go by. I mean, there are people, I've seen them, I've been doing it for 3 years now.
Right.
And so at least in one case, there's a couple that went by and the woman was pregnant when I began, and now they have a 3-year-old in the back seat of the car. And they wave to me every day.
Right.
But recently I've had a sign. I live in Medford, Massachusetts, and I have a sign that says it's warmer in the Arctic than it is in Medford. Because it's warmer in the Arctic than it is in Medford, Massachusetts, and it's not supposed to be warmer in the Arctic than it is in Medford, Massachusetts. That's not normal. That's bad. That's bad news. We need to pay attention to it because we're not going to fix it by ignoring it. And so people go by and mostly they don't know about it because our media doesn't report on it because it's disturbing news. No one likes to read disturbing news. And I figure, well, someone has to do it, and no one else is. So I guess it's up to me. Because if I look at my life as I get older, the questions that emerge are, you saw this happening, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you take a stand?
What a great message.
And so it's up to all of us to take a stand, to be forthright about it, to recognize the only way that we make progress on this is not by waiting for someone else to take the stand. We have to take that stand ourselves. And I draw that connection in my own concerts as well. When I give concerts of Hindustani classical singing, then I address the audience at some point during the course of the evening. And I say to them, this music is the result of long streams of historical tradition that come together for brief instants of time and manifest in song. When I sing to you, when I sing to an audience, I'm presenting the music that I learned from my teacher, who learned it from his teacher, and so on back, all the way into the remote past. And that means that this music is a mechanism for carrying the messages of the past into the future. So if I teach a student now, I am doing so in the hope that this music will go forward into the future.
Yes.
And that can't happen if there's no future to fill with music. Our civilization, all of both the great parts of it and the not so great parts of it, is contingent on having enough food, enough clean water, and enough time that we can do our practice, that we can meet for baitaks, that we can bring musicians from one place to another, that we can provide the opportunity for people to study singing and to perform and to foster a culture of erudition and scholarship and inquiry and art. And if you take away any of those ingredients, if you take away enough food, the whole thing collapses. So simply from love of the music, it's incumbent on us to take climate change seriously.
That's a great connection that you made. Mm-hmm.
And if we fail on that,
Mm-hmm.
then everything goes.
Mm-hmm.
And all you need is one generation interrupted in the transmission, and then the tradition is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to us to do it. And so when I stand on the roadside and I sing, I'm just trying to embody all of those things
Right.
as part of my own life. It's what I do. Maya Angelou, no, sorry, not Maya Angelou, it was Alice Walker who said, activism is the rent I pay for being on planet Earth. And so in that sense, I get up every morning and I pay the rent.
Yeah, beautiful way of saying it. Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
Right.
Someone else was asking me about it, and I said, if you go, you can see these, the mobiles, the moving sculptures. They're hung, and then there are all these beautiful shapes that move about. And then on the other side is a weight.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a little heavy ball of metal or stone or something, and that supports all these things. That's my activism over here. That's the balancing that allows the work that I do as an artist to maintain itself.
So I follow you on Facebook,
Yeah.
and I know that you write blogs and everything.
Mhm.
Are you planning to publish a book as well? Or do you have a book already?
I don't have a book already, and people ask me that periodically, and I have no immediate plans to publish, although periodically people show up on the Man with Sign Facebook page and go, gee, you should put these
I did
together
that
as
too.
a book.
I think I put a comment too like that.
And
Yeah.
it's very flattering to think that my prose has so many sterling qualities. I remain a little bit unconvinced that a mishmash of environmental activism, free-form amorphous philosophy, and Sargam exercises will really draw a big crowd. But who knows?
Yeah, I think you should do it.
We'll see.
Okay, for our younger generation,
Yeah.
What is your message regarding music, environment? You already said a lot of things.
Kurt Vonnegut said something very nice. He said, go into the arts. It's not necessarily a great way to make a living, but it's an important way to make a life.
Right.
And so it's important to find avenues of expression, to push the boundaries of what is allowed. Don't be afraid. Sing. Find other people to sing with. Find other people to make music with. Find people who aren't of your age and make music with them too.
That's great.
So the message is for everybody. It's not just
Right.
the younger generation.
Of course, yes. So Warren, our viewers would like to know about your family as well, your wife and your kids, your parents, and how was the support when you thought of going to India, taking this music and...
Well, I come from a family of eccentric academics. Scientists and
Right.
people who have carved out their own unusual pathways through the world. My father is one of the founders of an academic discipline, the study of human error. So the idea that someone in the family could go where no one else had gone is not exactly unusual for us. So their response has generally been, well, okay, that's interesting, and go ahead and do that. My father is 98, lives in Toronto, and he still works. He still does science. He's in the middle of various research projects. My wife is from South India, and we met when I was living in Pune. She was there getting a master's in English at Ferguson College, and she's a very fine musician. Her name is Vijaya Sundaram. And we have a daughter who is Sharada, who is 13 years old.
And she sings too?
She sings too. Everyone in the family sings, everyone plays guitar, everyone does a variety of instruments and so on. So my particular branch of my family has always been very strongly musical. Although my parents were not particularly musical. My father sang well, but did not perform. And my mother was not interested in or competent in music at all. But my mother was very fond of poetry. And so growing up, I was encouraged to memorize poetry and to recite poetry. So one of the after effects of that, I think, has been that I have a sensitivity to scansion and to the flow of words that has stood me in good stead in general as an educator and as a public speaker. I have no fear of talking in public.
So Warren, if you have any other stories to share with your viewers, which are interesting maybe.
Well, the most recent thing in the course of my work as an environmental activist, in 2016, I was part of a group of people that committed civil disobedience at the site of a pipeline construction project in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. So over the space of several months, many of us were arrested. So I was part of a group that went in and did civil disobedience at a pipeline site, and so I got put in handcuffs and taken away and put into the wagon, and they put me in the local jail, and I sat for 3 hours. It was a fascinating room. It was all concrete and glass rectangle with terrific acoustics. So I was able to go through all of my jailhouse songs. I was doing Johnny Cash. When I was a little boy, my mama told me, son. I did my whole repertoire of jailhouse songs. And then there followed 2 years almost of legal maneuvering. And finally, earlier this year, our charges were reduced, which was a blow to us, actually. We wanted to put on a full defense. We wanted to use the necessity defense of the urgency of climate change as a rationale for our civil disobedience. But we were allowed to present the necessity arguments for the judge in our final court hearing in March of this year. And we were, in fact, the necessity defense was accepted by the judge as a rationale for dismissing our charges. So it's not quite a legal precedent, but it's something of which I'm certainly proud. I'm glad to have been there. I think that making that case, the urgency of climate change, was a very big, that was a big part of my life, and it was very exciting to come out of that and to stand on the courthouse steps. It was, I was just a very minor player in this. There were some other people who committed far more profound acts of civil disobedience than I had, but it was a great honor to be part of that group. Al Gore's daughter, Karena, was part of that. There was a man named Tim DeChristopher, who was one of the great environmental activists of the century. So I had a chance to be part of that, to be in their company.
Our viewers would definitely like to listen to you as well singing. So if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes for us to listen to you,
that pull out my tambura. In the old days, the tambura was taken by human beings, but now we have these devices, and they let us.
Thank you so much.
जोगे जोगलियो जग कारण जोगे जोगलियो जग कारण ताज माया के बंधन जोगी ताज माया के बंधन जोगी सार्थक आपनो जन्म कियो जोगी जोग लियो जग कारण जोगी जोग लियो जग कारण ताज माया के बंधन जोगी ताज माया के बंधन जोगी सार्थक आपनो जन्म कियो जोगी जोग लियो जग कारण भाई बंद सब सुख के साथी भाई बंद सब सुख के साथी छोड़ लिए सब संपत त्यागी सेवा भेक लियो जग कारण जोगी जोग लियो जग कारण जोगी जोग लियो जग कारण जोगी जोग लियो जग कारण
क्या बात
Gorak Kalyan,
क्या बात
my Guruji's composition and one of my very favorites.
Thank you so much,
My
Warren,
pleasure.
for
My pleasure.
not just presenting this, but also for just coming here and talking about all that you do. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
A great pleasure. See you again.
See you. And with that, we come to the end of this episode of Cultural Journey with Manoshi. We'll see you again in another episode of Cultural Journey with Manoshi, सांस्कृतिक सफर मानुषी के साथ. Namaskar.